The punch bowl tilted, and every phone went up. In front of 200 laughing guests, he ordered his mistress to soak his pregnant wife and announced he'd never loved her. What he didn't know was that her brother was already inside the building, and he'd just heard everything. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. Helena Leon hadn't always been this small. There was a time when she had opinions, ambitions, a phone that rang with friends' voices. There was a time when she believed marriage meant partnership, that love was something built between equals, brick by brick, compromise by compromise. From the very first night with Everton Leon, she learned differently. The wedding had been beautiful, everyone said so. Cascading white roses, champagne fountains, a guest list that read like a directory of the city's elite. Everton had looked devastating in his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile charming enough to make her forget the whirlwind courtship that had brought them here. 3 months from first date to wedding day, her brother Gabriel had warned her it was too fast. She'd stopped taking his calls after that. The first rule appeared on their honeymoon. They were in Santorini, white buildings against impossibly blue water, and Helena had mentioned wanting to keep her consulting job at the marketing firm. Why would you need to work? Everton had asked, his tone gentle but with something underneath it she couldn't quite name. I make more than enough for both of us. For a whole family. Don't you want to focus on making our home perfect? On us? It had sounded romantic in the Mediterranean sunset, like being cherished, protected. She'd given her notice the day they returned. The second rule emerged more slowly, like water eroding stone. Her college friends started feeling distant, plans canceled, messages unanswered her messages, because Everton would pick up her phone while she showered, scroll through her texts with a frown. Claire seems pretty dramatic, he'd say, always complaining about her boyfriend. That kind of negativity isn't good for you. Emma posted photos of you two from college. Did you really dress like that? It's a bit embarrassing for my wife. Why do you need to get coffee with Rachel? What do you two even have to talk about anymore? Your lives are completely different now. One by one, her friendships quietly suffocated. It was easier not to fight. Easier to believe that maybe married life really did mean leaving old connections behind, growing up, moving forward. The third rule was never spoken aloud, but Helena learned it fast. Her world ended at the walls of their mansion in the Riverside district. The house was stunning, 5 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen she never used because Everton preferred eating out, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens she wasn't allowed to tend herself. We have staff for that, Everton reminded her whenever she suggested planting flowers or learning to cook properly. You don't need to do labor. Just be beautiful. Be ready when I come home. That's enough. Beautiful meant the right clothes, he chose them. The right hair, he scheduled her salon appointments. The right words, which meant fewer and fewer of them as the months passed. She became an ornament in her own life. Gabriel tried to reach out. 3 times in the first year. Each call ended the same way. You don't understand what marriage means, Helena would tell him, voice tight. You live in a world of violence and crime. Everton gives me stability. Peace. I'm happy. The lies tasted like ash. Gabriel's world was dangerous. She'd grown up adjacent to it, watching her older brother rise through the ranks of organizations that operated in shadows, that solved problems with methods the police couldn't touch. She'd spent her teenage years desperate to escape that darkness, to build a normal life with normal safety. Everton Leon had seemed like that escape. She'd been so catastrophically wrong. By their first anniversary, Helena had no job, no friends, no hobbies, no phone privacy, no life beyond the marble prison Everton had built around her. She told herself it was temporary, that once they had children, things would soften, that motherhood would give her purpose again. When the pregnancy test showed positive 6 months ago, she'd actually felt hope. A baby. Everton had stared at the test like it was evidence of a crime. Already? I thought you'd be happy, Helena whispered. You said you wanted a family. He'd recovered quickly, painted on a smile. Of course, yes, this is good. But the warmth never reached his eyes. The pregnancy only tightened his control. Suddenly, every movement was monitored, for the baby's safety. Every bite of food scrutinized. Every moment of her day scheduled, supervised, suffocating. Helena spent her 6th month of pregnancy moving through the mansion like a ghost, her hands constantly resting on her growing belly, whispering promises to her unborn child that their life would be different, better, freer. She'd almost stopped believing it. Then came the invitation. "I want you to come to something," Everton announced one morning over breakfast neither of them was eating. He sat across from her at the glass dining table in his tailored navy suit, already dressed for whatever meeting would keep him away until midnight. The Grand Belle Vista is hosting an elite social event Saturday night. Business connections, city officials, people who matter. "I think it's time you were seen publicly as my wife." Helena's heart had actually leaped. "Really? You want me there?" "It's important for my image." He'd sipped his espresso, not quite meeting her eyes. A successful man with a beautiful pregnant wife. It sends the right message. She should have heard the coldness in that. Should have recognized she was being described as a prop, not a partner. Instead, she'd felt pathetically grateful. For 3 days, she'd agonized over what to wear. The dress had to be perfect, elegant, but not attention-seeking, expensive but not ostentatious, flattering to her changing body, but still appropriate. She'd finally chosen a shimmering silver gown that gathered beautifully over her belly, paired with delicate heels she could barely walk in. Saturday evening arrived, wrapped in nervous excitement. Helena had studied herself in the mirror, seeing someone she almost recognized, someone who looked like she belonged in the world again. "You look acceptable," Everton had said, barely glancing at her. Acceptable felt like the highest praise she'd received in months. The drive to the Grand Belle Vista had been silent. Everton scrolled through his phone while Helena watched the city lights blur past, her hand protectively cradling her belly. The baby kicked against her palm, steady, strong, alive. "Everything's going to change tonight," she whispered to her child, believing it. She had no idea how right she was. They walked into the Grand Belle Vista ballroom together, Everton in his designer black suit, Helena in her shimmering silver, and stepped into a scene of breathtaking opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors. String quartets played near fountains. 200 of the city's elite circulated with champagne and predatory smiles. Helena had felt hope. She should have felt dread. The first hour at the Grand Belle Vista passed in a haze of introductions Helena would never remember. "My wife, Helena," Everton would say, his hand possessively gripping her elbow as he steered her from conversation to conversation. The words sounded right, but his tone carried the same inflection he might use to say, "my watch," or "my car." She smiled until her face ached, nodded at appropriate moments, let her hand rest visibly on her pregnant belly so the women would coo and the men would offer congratulations that felt more transactional than genuine. No one asked her questions. No one seemed to see her at all. "Everton, wonderful to see the family man finally emerging," a silver-haired investor said, clapping Everton on the shoulder. "Nothing stabilizes a man's reputation quite like a wife and child." Stabilizes a reputation. Helena felt something cold settle in her chest. She excused herself to find water, desperate for a moment alone, but even that small freedom was monitored. Everton's eyes followed her across the ballroom like searchlights tracking an escaped prisoner. Near the fountain, an older woman in emerald silk smiled warmly. "Your first child?" "Yes," Helena said, grateful for genuine interest. "A girl, due in 3 months. How wonderful, and your husband must be thrilled." Helena opened her mouth to lie, to say, "Yes, of course, we're so happy," but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, unbidden, a memory surfaced. 2 months into the pregnancy, Helena had been researching baby names on her tablet when Everton walked in. "What are you doing?" "Looking at names." "I thought maybe we could choose together." "I'll decide the name." He'd taken the tablet from her hands. "You're carrying the child, Helena. That's your job. Everything else? That's mine." She'd nodded. "Of course." That made sense, didn't it? Later that night, she'd locked herself in the bathroom and cried so quietly the water running in the sink covered the sound. "He's adjusting," Helena finally told the woman in emerald silk. The woman's expression shifted just slightly into something that looked like recognition, like she'd heard that particular lie before, maybe even told it herself once. "Well," the woman said gently, squeezing Helena's hand, "I hope you have family nearby. We all need someone." "Family." Gabriel's face flashed through Helena's mind, his dark eyes serious, his tattooed hands folded on the table the last time they'd met, nearly 2 years ago now. "Helena, something feels wrong about this man," Gabriel had said carefully, never one to waste words. "The speed of the courtship, the way he positions himself between you and everyone else. I've seen men like him." "You've seen criminals?" Helena had shot back. "You think everyone operates like you do?" Everton isn't dangerous, Gabriel. He's successful, stable, everything you're not. Gabriel had absorbed the blow without flinching. If you ever need me, I won't. She'd stood to leave. I'm building a different life. One without violence. Without looking over my shoulder. I need you to respect that. I'll always respect you, Ermazinia. Little sister, even when you're making a mistake. She'd walked out. Changed her number. Returned Everton's calls unreturned. She'd thought she was choosing safety. She'd actually been choosing isolation. I should get back, Helena murmured to the woman, reality pressing back in. When she returned to Everton's side, she found him deep in conversation with an older man whose face she recognized from business news, Thomas Leon, Everton's father. The family resemblance was striking. Same sharp jawline, same calculating eyes, same smile that never quite reached warmth. Ah, the expectant mother. Thomas acknowledged her with a nod that felt more like dismissal. Everton tells me everything is progressing well. Yes, the baby is healthy. I meant the arrangement. Thomas's smile was blade-thin. Your brother's protection has been quite valuable. Several problematic competitors have suddenly become cooperative. The Caldera name opens doors that money alone cannot. Helena's blood turned cold. I don't understand. Thomas and Everton exchanged a glance, the kind of wordless communication that excluded her entirely. Nothing to concern yourself with, dear, Thomas said. Just business. The complex kind that requires strategic alliances. Strategic alliances. Not marriage, not love. Alliances. Father, perhaps we should. Everton started, but Thomas waved him off. She's family now. She should understand how valuable her contribution has been. He turned to Helena with something almost like appreciation. Your brother may be a criminal, my dear, but he's a remarkably useful one. His reputation provides a certain insurance. Problems disappear. Negotiations conclude favorably. All because people believe Gabriel Caldera has interest in protecting Leon family assets. The ballroom suddenly felt airless. Gabriel doesn't know about any business arrangement. Of course not, Thomas chuckled. That's the beauty of it. He believes he's staying away out of respect for your wishes. Meanwhile, his reputation does our work without him lifting a finger. Quite elegant, really. Helena looked at Everton, desperate for denial. For him to say his father was exaggerating, or joking, or wrong, Everton wouldn't meet her eyes. You married me to use my brother? Her voice came out small, broken. That was the point? Helena, Everton started. Oh, don't make her feel too badly, Thomas interrupted. She got a comfortable life out of it. Beautiful home, financial security, social standing, fair trade, all things considered. And now with the child. He gestured vaguely at her belly. The connection is even more permanent. Gabriel will never fully walk away from his sister's child. We have leverage for decades. Leverage. Her daughter. They were discussing her unborn daughter as leverage. The baby kicked hard as if she could feel her mother's distress through the womb. Excuse me, Helena whispered, turning before either man could respond. She walked blindly through the crowd, her vision blurring, the golden ballroom becoming a prison of marble and light. Every face she passed looked predatory now. Every smile concealed calculation. She'd been purchased, traded, used as bait to trap her brother without his knowledge. And she'd helped them do it by cutting Gabriel off so completely. Helena found herself near the grand entrance, her hand pressed against the cool marble wall, trying to remember how to breathe. The baby kicked again, steady, insistent, alive. She'd thought marriage would save her from Gabriel's dangerous world. Instead, she'd been weaponized by it. Helena had barely steadied her breathing when a woman's laugh, bright, confident, territorial, cut through the ballroom's ambient noise. She turned, following the sound, and saw her. The woman stood near the champagne fountain, holding court among a small circle of admirers. She wore an emerald gown that plunged daringly at the neckline, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, her posture radiating the kind of ease that came from knowing she belonged in rooms like this. Knowing she was wanted. What made Helena's stomach drop wasn't the woman's beauty. It was the way Everton was looking at her. Helena had spent 18 months as Everton's wife. She knew every expression he wore, the polite smile for business associates, the practiced charm for investors, the cold dismissal he reserved for her. But this was different. This was hunger, admiration, something almost like joy. The woman caught Everton's gaze across the room and smiled slow, knowing, intimate. And Everton smiled back. Helena's hand tightened protectively over her belly. The baby kicked once, as if sensing her mother's distress. She should leave. should find a quiet corner and wait for this nightmare evening to end. But something kept her rooted in place, watching as Everton excused himself from his father's circle and began crossing the ballroom toward the woman in emerald. Helena followed, staying far enough back to remain unnoticed, close enough to hear. "Scarlett." Everton's voice carried warmth Helena hadn't heard in months, years maybe. "You look devastating. You said to make an impression." The woman, Scarlett, touched his arm with casual familiarity. Her fingers lingered on his sleeve. "I assume this is appropriate for the occasion?" "More than appropriate." Everton's hand found the small of her back, intimate and possessive. "Thank you for coming. I know the timing is delicate." "Delicate?" Scarlett's laugh was low, amused. "Is that what we're calling this?" Helena felt ice spreading through her veins. The way they stood together, the easy intimacy of their body language, the inside jokes. This wasn't new. This was established, rehearsed. "How long?" Helena didn't realize she'd spoken aloud until both of them turned. Everton's expression shifted through several emotions, in rapid succession: surprise, annoyance, then settling into something cold and controlled. "Helena, I thought you were resting. How long have you been sleeping with her?" Scarlett's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. She looked at Everton with something like amusement, as if Helena were a child who'd stumbled into an adult conversation. "Does it matter?" Everton asked, his tone dismissive. "You really want to do this here?" "I want to understand." Helena's voice shook but held. "I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. And you're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Having an adult relationship with someone who actually understands me?" Everton supplied. "Yes, Helena, I am. Scarlett and I have been together for 14 months. Since before you got pregnant, if you're keeping track. 14 months. Almost the entire pregnancy. Every doctor's appointment she'd attended alone. Every night he'd claimed to be working late. Every morning he'd left before she woke, he'd been with Scarlett." "Why did you even invite me tonight?" Helena whispered. Everton exchanged another glance with Scarlett, the kind of wordless communication that spoke of shared plans, of scripts being followed. "Because," he said slowly, "it's time to be honest. About what this marriage actually is. About what you actually are." More guests were noticing now. Conversations dying, heads turning, phones being subtly angled to capture whatever drama was unfolding. Helena felt exposed, vulnerable, but couldn't make herself walk away. "What I am? I'm your wife. You're a transaction that served its purpose." Everton's voice grew louder, more theatrical. He was performing now, playing to an audience. "My father needed access to your brother's world. Gabriel Caldera's protection, his reputation, his network. The easiest way to get it? Marry his estranged little sister." Gasps rippled through nearby listeners. More people turned, drawn by the spectacle. "We've been using the Caldera name for 18 months, Everton continued, his voice carrying across marble floors. "Every business deal, every negotiation, every problem that mysteriously disappeared, all because people think Gabriel has a vested interest in protecting Leon family assets. Because of you." Helena felt her world tilting. "Gabriel doesn't even know." "Exactly," Everton smiled, sharp and cruel. "That's the brilliance of it. He thinks he's respecting your wishes by staying away. Meanwhile, his reputation does all our work. And the best part?" He gestured at her pregnant belly. "The baby makes it permanent. Gabriel will never fully walk away from his sister's child. We have leverage for decades." The baby, their daughter, kicked hard, as if protesting being reduced to leverage. "But here's the thing, Helena." Everton's voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "The deal is done now. The contracts are signed. The protections are in place. My father's business is secure, which means—" He trailed off meaningfully. "Which means I don't need you anymore." The words hung in the champagne-scented air like a death sentence. Helena looked around at the watching faces, 200 of the city's elite, all bearing witness to her destruction. Their expressions ranged from pity to fascination to barely concealed schadenfreude. Not one person moved to intervene. "I want a divorce," Everton announced to the room at large. "Effective immediately. My lawyers will handle the details. Helena, you'll be provided for minimally, but this farce of a marriage ends tonight." Scarlett stepped closer to Everton, sliding her arm through his with proprietary ease. "Finally," she breathed. "No more pretending." The humiliation crashed over Helena in waves. Her hands trembled as they cradled her belly. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who were already recording her destruction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Everton raised his voice, playing ringmaster to Helena's public execution. "You're witnessing history. The moment I finally free myself from the biggest mistake of my life." He turned to Scarlett with exaggerated gallantry. "Darling, I believe you wanted to make a statement?" Scarlett's smile was wicked as she reached for a crystal punch bowl on the nearby fountain table, its contents gleaming amber under chandelier light. "Oh," she purred, lifting the bowl with both hands. "I've been waiting for this." Helena stood frozen as Scarlett approached, the bowl raised like an offering to cruelty itself, and every phone in the room angled to capture what happened next. The crystal bowl caught the light as Scarlett raised it higher, liquid sloshing near the rim. Helena's world narrowed to that single moment, the weight of 200 gazes pressing against her skin. The phones held aloft like judges' gavels, the predatory anticipation hanging in the air like expensive perfume. "Don't," Helena whispered, her voice barely audible over the string quartet that had stopped playing. "Please, I'm pregnant. This is exactly what you deserve." Scarlett's voice was honey-sweet, laced with venom. "For thinking you could hold on to a man like Everton. For believing you were anything more than a placeholder." Helena's hands instinctively tightened over her belly, as if she could shield her daughter from what was coming. The baby kicked once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession, frantic little movements that felt like protest. "Scarlett, darling, don't hold back." Everton's voice came from somewhere behind her, amused and encouraging. "Show everyone here who truly deserves to stand beside me." The bowl tilted forward. For one crystalline second, Helena saw her reflection in the liquid surface distorted, drowning before the water even touched her. Then the world became cold. The punch crashed over her head in a freezing cascade, shocking every nerve ending in her body. The liquid, ice-cold, sticky sweet, humiliating, streamed through her carefully styled hair, down her face, soaking into the silver gown she'd spent 3 weeks choosing. The fabric clung to her skin, heavy and suffocating, plastered against her pregnant belly like a second skin of shame. Laughter erupted around her. Not polite chuckles, but genuine amusement, the kind that came from watching someone else's destruction and feeling grateful it wasn't your own. Helena gasped, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The cold liquid had shocked her system so completely that for a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there trembling as champagne-scented punch dripped from her chin onto the marble floor. The baby kicked violently, harder than she'd ever felt before, as if her daughter could sense the cruelty being inflicted, as if even in the womb she was trying to fight back. "Oh my God," someone whispered, their voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Is she really just standing there?" "Get a picture," another voice hissed. "This is incredible." Helena forced her eyes open, sticky with liquid. Mascara bleeding black, tears down her cheeks, and saw the phones. Dozens of them, all angled toward her, capturing every angle of her humiliation. Flashes went off like paparazzi at a crime scene. This was entertainment to them, a story they'd tell at cocktail parties for months. Remember that night at the Grand Belle Vista when Everton Leon's pregnant wife got what was coming to her? "Look at her," Scarlett said, her voice carrying across the ballroom with theatrical projection. She still held the empty crystal bowl, displaying it like a trophy. Standing there like a drowned rat. "Did you actually think you belonged in this world, Helena? Did you think a man like Everton would choose you if you weren't a convenient bridge to your brother's power?" Helena's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her throat had closed, her voice lost somewhere beneath the weight of liquid and shame. "She can't even defend herself." Scarlett laughed, turning to the crowd with a performer's ease. "This is the woman who thought she could keep Everton Leon satisfied? Look at her. She's pathetic." More laughter. More phones. More flashes. Helena's legs trembled beneath her. The heels she'd barely been able to walk in, the ones she'd practiced in for hours, suddenly felt impossible to balance on. The wet fabric of her gown clung to her thighs, restricting movement, making her feel trapped in her own ruined skin. "Everton," she managed to whisper, turning toward where her husband stood watching with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Please, make her stop." For a moment, one terrible, hope-filled moment, Helena thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or recognition of how far this had gone. Then Everton smiled. It was the cruelest thing he'd ever done to her, and that was saying something after 18 months of emotional suffocation. That smile said everything. "I planned this. I wanted this. This is exactly what I brought you here for." "Make her stop?" Everton repeated, his voice carrying that same theatrical projection Scarlett had used. "Helena, this isn't a punishment. This is a revelation. For 18 months, I've had to pretend you mattered. Had to play the devoted husband, the excited father-to-be. Do you know how exhausting that was? How much effort it took to pretend I could ever love someone like you? Each word landed like a physical blow. Helena's hand pressed harder against her belly, the baby's kicks becoming more agitated. Her daughter could feel this, the stress hormones flooding Helena's system, the rapid heartbeat, the terror and humiliation coursing through her veins. You were always temporary, Everton continued, circling her now like a predator studying wounded prey. A means to an end. The mousy little sister of Gabriel Caldera, so desperate to escape her brother's world that she'd believe any man who offered her a different life. You made it so easy, Helena. So pathetically easy. Scarlett moved to stand beside Everton, her hand sliding possessively across his chest. They looked like a couple in a fashion magazine, beautiful, powerful, untouchable. And Helena, dripping and shaking in her ruined gown, looked like exactly what they wanted her to be, defeated. This marriage is over, Everton announced to the watching crowd, his arm wrapping around Scarlett's waist. The lawyers will handle the details. You'll get enough money to survive barely and supervised visitation with the child once she's born. But make no mistake, Helena. You are nothing. You always were. And everyone here tonight witnessed exactly what you deserve. The crowd's silence felt heavier than their laughter had. This wasn't just humiliation, it was annihilation. The complete destruction of a person in front of witnesses who would ensure the story spread throughout every elite circle in the city. Helena stood in her puddle of punch and tears and ruined dreams, 6 months pregnant, utterly alone, while 200 people watched and did nothing. She had never felt more invisible in her entire life. And then from somewhere in the marble hallway, beyond the ballroom's grand entrance, footsteps echoed. Steady, purposeful, coming closer. Gabriel Caldera had arrived at the Grand Belvista 20 minutes early. Early was habitual for him, a survival instinct honed through years of operating in a world where tardiness could mean ambush, where lack of awareness could mean death. He'd learned long ago to control every variable he could, and timing was the easiest variable to master. The venue was impressive, even by his standards. Marble columns rose toward vaulted ceilings painted with classical frescoes. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like frozen waterfalls, the kind of place where the city's elite gathered to pretend their money made them untouchable. Gabriel knew better. Money made people visible targets, nothing more. He'd been invited through business channels, a legitimate construction contract his company had secured with the venue's ownership group. Above board, legal, the kind of work he'd been cultivating to balance his family's more complicated enterprises. Thomas Leon's development firm was one of the co-hosts, though Gabriel hadn't made the connection to his sister's married name until he'd seen the guest list. Leon. The name had stopped him cold when he'd noticed it on the invitation. Helena had married into the Leon family, the same Leons throwing this event. He'd debated attending. Helena had made her wishes clear 2 years ago. She wanted distance, wanted a life separate from his world, wanted safety he apparently couldn't provide. He'd respected that, even though it had carved something hollow in his chest to lose his little sister to silence. But the invitation had been professional, not personal, and Gabriel had learned to separate business from emotion, even when emotion threatened to bleed through. So he'd come, early, cautious, aware. The grand hallway leading to the ballroom stretched before him like a corridor in a cathedral. Gleaming floors, ornate sconces, the muted sound of string music filtering through heavy doors ahead. Gabriel walked with measured steps, his long black suit impeccably tailored, the tattoos on his hands visible despite the formal setting. He'd never hidden what he was, even in spaces that preferred their danger sanitized and invisible. Then he heard the laughter. Not celebratory laughter, the kind that came from genuine joy or entertainment. This was different. Sharper, cruel. The sound of a crowd watching someone else's misery and finding it amusing. Gabriel's steps slowed. His instincts, finely tuned through years of reading rooms and situations, started sending warning signals through his nervous system. Something was wrong. Then he heard the voice. Male, projecting, theatrical. Exactly what you deserve. The words echoed through the marble hallway, bouncing off expensive surfaces, reaching Gabriel's ears with perfect clarity. And then he heard a name that made his blood turn to ice. Helena. His sister's name, spoken with contempt, with dismissal. Gabriel stopped walking. Every muscle in his body went still, the kind of stillness that came before violence, the predator's pause before the strike. His dark eyes fixed on the ballroom doors ahead, his expression unreadable, his hands loose at his sides. More laughter rippled from inside the ballroom, More voices, overlapping. She's just standing there. Get a picture. This is incredible. Helena's name again. Spoken by multiple voices now. Some pitying, some amused. All complicit in whatever was happening beyond those doors. Gabriel moved forward. Not rushing would draw attention, would scatter witnesses. He walked with the same measured pace as before, but now every step carried intention, purpose. The weight of a man who had just heard his sister being hurt and was moving to correct the situation. The heavy ballroom doors stood before him, partially open. Through the gap, he could see the crowd's backs, all turned toward something at the center of the room, all focused on a spectacle, all watching instead of helping. He heard another voice, female, sweet and venomous. Did you actually think you belonged in this world, Helena? More laughter, more cruelty, more phones being raised to capture something that made Gabriel's jaw tighten imperceptibly. He'd spent 2 years respecting Helena's boundaries, 2 years maintaining distance because she'd asked him to, 2 years convincing himself that maybe she really had found the safe, normal life she'd wanted away from his world. But this sound, this mockery, this group cruelty, this wasn't safety. This was predation wearing formal attire. Gabriel reached the doorway and paused, taking in the scene with the tactical assessment that was second nature to him. 200 guests, give or take, mostly clustered in a rough circle around the center of the room. Phones raised, expressions ranging from fascinated to uncomfortable, to openly entertained. A string quartet standing frozen near a fountain, their instruments silent. And at the center, Gabriel's vision narrowed to tunnel focus. Helena, his little sister, who he hadn't seen in 2 years, who'd cut him off to build a different life, who'd chosen distance over his protection, standing in the middle of the ballroom in a soaked silver gown that clung to her skin, liquid dripping from her hair and face, her hands pressed protectively over a visibly pregnant belly. Pregnant. Helena was pregnant, and someone had just humiliated her in front of 200 witnesses while she stood there trembling, soaked, alone. Gabriel's hands flexed once the only outward sign of the rage building beneath his controlled exterior. He catalogued the rest of the scene in seconds. A woman in an emerald gown holding an empty crystal bowl with a triumphant expression. A man in a white suit jacket standing beside her with his arm around her waist, smiling like he'd just won something. The man looked satisfied, victorious, like he'd orchestrated this humiliation and was pleased with the results. Gabriel's eyes went cold. He stepped through the doorway and into the ballroom proper, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. The guests nearest the entrance noticed first heads turning, conversations dying, a ripple of recognition spreading through the crowd like a shockwave. Gabriel Caldera didn't need to announce himself. His reputation walked in before him. The laughter stopped. Phones lowered slightly. The cruel entertainment drained from faces as people realized exactly who had just entered the room. Gabriel's eyes never left his sister. He walked forward through the crowd, which parted automatically. Instinctively, people stepping back to create a path because some part of their survival instinct recognized a predator when they saw one. The man in the white jacket, Helena's husband, Gabriel assumed finally noticed the shift in the room's energy. He turned, following the crowd's collective gaze, and his face drained of color when he saw Gabriel approaching. Gabriel registered the fear, catalogued it, filed it away for later. Right now, his only focus was the trembling woman in the soaked gown, who looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. He crossed the marble floor in measured steps, his long black suit a stark contrast to the champagne and gold opulence surrounding him. The tattoos on his hands were clearly visible as he moved marks that told stories of violence, loyalty, survival in worlds these people only read about in news articles. Gabriel stopped directly in front of Helena. She looked up at him with mascara-streaked eyes, her expression cycling through shock, recognition, shame, and finally relief so profound it nearly broke through his controlled exterior. "Gabriel," she whispered, his name catching in her throat. He didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, he reached up and unbuttoned his suit jacket with deliberate care, shrugged it off his shoulders, and draped it around Helena's trembling form. The jacket was warm from his body heat. It covered her soaked gown, her exposed shoulders, wrapped her in something that felt like protection after hours of vulnerability. Only then did Gabriel turn to face the man in the white jacket. His voice, when it came, was quiet, conversational, more terrifying than any shout. "Explain." Everton Leon had built his empire on confidence. Confidence in boardrooms, where he'd leveraged his father's connections into multi-million-dollar deals. Confidence at charity galas, where he'd charmed investors and politicians with equal ease. confidence in every interaction, because he'd learned early that projection of power often mattered more than actual power itself. But standing in the Grand Belvista ballroom, facing Gabriel Caldera's cold, steady gaze, Everton felt that confidence crumble like paper in flame. "I said," Gabriel repeated, his voice still quiet, still conversational. "Explain." The single word carried more threat than any shout could have. It wasn't a request, it was a command from someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be obeyed. Everton's mouth opened, closed, his prepared speeches, his theatrical declarations, every clever justification he'd rehearsed, all of it evaporated under Gabriel's unwavering stare. Everton started, then stopped, suddenly aware of how the room had shifted. The guests who'd been laughing moments ago now stood frozen, phones lowered, expressions carefully neutral. No one was recording anymore. No one was amused. They'd all recognized the man standing in the center of their exclusive gathering, and recognition had brought fear. Gabriel Caldera. The name carried weight in this city, not the social climbing weight of old money or political connections, but the heavy, dangerous weight of a man who operated in shadows, who solved problems that law enforcement couldn't touch, whose family name made powerful people nervous. Scarlett, still holding the empty crystal bowl, took an involuntary step backward. Her triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by something that looked like dawning comprehension and growing panic. "This is a private matter," Everton managed, attempting to reclaim some authority. "Between my wife and myself. It doesn't concern your wife," Gabriel interrupted, his tone unchanged. "Is my sister, which makes everything concerning her my concern." The words fell into the ballroom like stones into still water, ripples of understanding spreading through the crowd. Sister. Helena Leon was Gabriel Caldera's sister. The guest who'd been laughing loudest suddenly found the marble floor fascinating. The woman who'd suggested getting pictures was subtly deleting footage from her phone. The investors who'd congratulated Everton on his strategic marriage were slowly backing toward exits. Everyone understood the same thing simultaneously. They'd just witnessed the public humiliation of a woman whose brother could make them disappear. Gabriel's attention shifted briefly to Scarlett, who still clutched the bowl like a security blanket. "Put that down." It wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, but Scarlett's hands released the crystal immediately, the bowl clattering onto a nearby table with enough force to crack the base. Then Gabriel's focus returned to Everton, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You invited my sister to this party," Gabriel said, each word precise and measured. "You humiliated her in front of 200 witnesses. You allowed your mistress to assault a pregnant woman while everyone recorded it for entertainment. And you did all of this believing what? Exactly. That there would be no consequences? Your sister cut you off," Everton said, grasping for any foothold. "She chose to marry me. She wanted nothing to do with your world. This has nothing to do with you. Everything to do with me." Gabriel took a single step forward. Everton flinched. It was subtle, just a slight tensing of shoulders, a minimal backward shift of weight, but everyone saw it. The man who'd been playing ringmaster to Helena's destruction had just physically recoiled from Gabriel's presence. "Let me tell you what I see," Gabriel continued, his voice still quiet, still controlled. "I see a man who trapped my sister in a marriage built on lies, who isolated her from everyone who cared about her, who used her connection to me without my knowledge or consent to legitimize business dealings that couldn't stand on their own merit." Everton's face went pale. Behind him, Thomas Leon, who'd been watching from the edges of the crowd, tried to disappear into the gathering, but Gabriel's eyes found him instantly. "Both of you," Gabriel added. "Father and son, using my sister as leverage to open doors you had no right to walk through, making deals in my name without my permission, trading on Caldera protection you never actually secured." "We never claimed," Thomas started. "You implied." Gabriel's gaze was surgical in its precision. "You let people believe that marrying Helena gave you access to my resources, my reputation, my network. You've been operating under false pretenses for 18 months, and every business partner you've misled is going to know that by morning." The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Gabriel was going to expose them. Publicly, professionally, completely. "Now," Gabriel said, returning his attention to Everton, "you're going to tell me exactly what you said to my sister tonight. Every word, every accusation, every cruelty. And these 200 witnesses are going to confirm your honesty." Everton's throat worked, but no sound emerged. "She's pregnant," Gabriel continued, his voice dropping even lower, becoming almost intimate in its menace. 6 months, From what I can see, carrying your child while you publicly declared you never loved her, while you announced your affair, while you orchestrated her humiliation for entertainment. Behind Gabriel, still wrapped in his black suit jacket, Helena had started crying, not the silent tears from before, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. The sound cut through the ballroom like a blade, making guests look away in shame. "Gabriel, I can explain." Everton tried again. "No." Gabriel raised one hand, fingers extended, and Everton's words died in his throat. "You can't. There is no explanation that justifies what you've done. No business strategy, no personal motivation, no excuse that makes this acceptable." The hand gesture was minimal, barely a movement, but it carried absolute authority. Everton stood paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything but stand there while Gabriel dismantled him with quiet words. "You used my sister," Gabriel said. "You trapped her. You controlled her. You reduced her to a transaction and then discarded her when you decided the deal was complete. And you did it publicly, with witnesses, because you genuinely believed she was powerless." Gabriel's expression didn't change, his face remained calm, almost serene, but his eyes had gone completely cold. "You were wrong." The two words carried more weight than any threat Everton had ever heard. They promised consequences without specifying them, which somehow made them more terrifying. "Mr. Caldera," Scarlett's voice cracked as she attempted to speak. "We didn't know." "You knew she was his wife," Gabriel said without looking at her. "You knew she was pregnant. You knew she was vulnerable. You knew exactly what you were doing when you humiliated her for sport." Scarlett's face crumbled. "I'm sorry." "Not to me." Gabriel finally turned to look at her fully. To her. He gestured toward Helena, who was still crying, still trembling despite the jacket around her shoulders. Scarlett opened her mouth, closed it, then did something unexpected. She ran. Straight through the crowd, her emerald gown flashing as she fled toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically against marble. Gabriel watched her go with complete indifference, then turned back to Everton. "Your turn," he said simply. Everton's hands were shaking. He'd hidden them in his pockets to disguise the tremor, but Gabriel noticed everything. The nervous swallow, the slight shift of weight from foot to foot, the way Everton's eyes kept darting toward exits, calculating distances, measuring escape routes. There would be no escape. "You haven't answered my question," Gabriel said, his tone still conversational, still quiet. "Tell me exactly what you said to my sister tonight." We were discussing the marriage," Everton stammered. "No." Gabriel's interruption was surgical. "You weren't discussing. You were announcing. There's a difference. 200 witnesses heard you declare that you never loved her, that your marriage was transactional, that she was disposable. Say it again. Now. To me." Everton's face flushed red, then drained to white. "I never loved you." Gabriel quoted Everton's earlier words back to him with perfect recall. "This marriage was my father's deal. You were a means to an end." The mousy little sister of Gabriel Caldera, so desperate to escape her brother's world that she'd believe any man who offered her a different life. "You made it so easy, Helena. So pathetically easy." Each repeated word landed like a physical blow. Everton flinched with every sentence, while around them, guests who'd found the speech entertaining earlier now looked sick. "Those were your words?" Gabriel asked, though it wasn't really a question. I was upset. "You seemed quite pleased, actually." Gabriel's gaze was unblinking. "Smiling. Performing. You orchestrated this entire evening specifically to humiliate my sister in the most public way possible. You invited her to her first social event in 18 months, let her believe things were changing, then used the party as a stage for her destruction. Mr. Caldera, if we could discuss this privately." "No." The word was final. "Absolute. You made this public. It stays public. These witnesses watched you humiliate a pregnant woman for entertainment. They'll watch the consequences too." Gabriel took another step forward, and this time Everton actually stumbled backward, his polished shoes slipping slightly on the marble floor still wet from the spilled punch. "Here's what's going to happen," Gabriel said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "The business arrangement you and your father created using my sister as bait? It's void. Every deal you made trading on the Caldera name, every contract you signed implying you had my family's protection, every partnership you secured because people believed marrying Helena gave you access to my resources, all of it ends tonight." Thomas Leon pushed forward through the crowd, his face contorted with anger and fear. You can't simply invalidate legitimate business contracts. Watch me. Gabriel's eyes shifted to the older man. You forced your son to marry my sister to create an illusion of alliance. You used her as leverage without her knowledge or consent. You turned her into a commodity. And when the commodity served its purpose, you both discarded her like trash. It was just business, Thomas protested weakly. Business. Gabriel's expression remained utterly calm, which was somehow more frightening than rage would have been. You call weaponizing my sister just business. Let's see how your business partners feel when they learn the protection they thought they had never actually existed. When they realize every deal they made based on Caldera Association was built on lies. Around them, guests were pulling out phones not to record anymore, but to make calls, send messages, distance themselves from the Leons as quickly as possible. The social calculation was instant. Better to abandon the family now than be caught in the fallout later. Gabriel noted the exodus with satisfaction. The Leon's social capital was evaporating in real time. My lawyers will contact every single one of your business partners by morning, Gabriel continued. They'll make it very clear that the Caldera family had no knowledge of your deception, no involvement in your schemes, and no interest in protecting you from the consequences. You're about to learn exactly how many of your legitimate business contracts were actually built on perceived intimidation. You're going to destroy us over a woman who chose to marry into our family? Thomas's voice rose in desperation. She came willingly. She came believing she was choosing love and safety. Gabriel's voice cut like a blade. She came because your son is an accomplished liar who exploited her desire to escape my world. She came because she trusted the wrong man. That's not consent, that's manipulation. Everton found his voice again, grasping for any defense. I provided for her. She lived in luxury. You isolated her. Gabriel's interruption was absolute. You controlled every aspect of her life. You monitored her communications, eliminated her friendships, forbade her from working, and reduced her world to the walls of a mansion that functioned as a prison. You didn't provide for her, you purchased her silence and compliance. The accusations hung in the air, each one undeniable. Several guests were nodding now, recognizing the pattern, perhaps remembering moments they'd witnessed and dismissed as marital dynamics rather than abuse. And then, Gabriel continued, his voice dropping even lower. When she got pregnant with your child, instead of changing, you tightened your control. You made her believe the baby might finally earn your love, then used that hope to trap her even more completely. Behind Gabriel, Helena's sobs had quieted into exhausted, shaking breaths. She stood wrapped in his jacket, one hand pressed against her belly where the baby had finally stopped kicking, the other clutching the fabric like a lifeline. I loved, Everton started, but couldn't finish the lie. You loved nothing, Gabriel said. You wanted access, legitimacy, protection you didn't deserve. My sister was just the tool you used to get it. And now, he gestured around the ballroom at the fleeing guests. The abandoned champagne glasses, the phones being rapidly pocketed, the social structure crumbling in real time. Now you have nothing. Everton's face contorted through several emotions: anger, fear, desperation, calculation. My father's connections are abandoning him as we speak, Gabriel observed calmly. Look around, Everton. Count how many people are still standing here willing to be associated with your family. Go ahead. I'll wait. Everton's eyes scanned the thinning crowd. Partners were leaving. Investors were departing. Social allies were vanishing like smoke. Even the string quartet had quietly packed their instruments and slipped toward the exits. Only the truly trapped remained, those whose businesses were too entangled with the Leons to escape immediately, and those too curious to leave before seeing how this ended. You built everything on a foundation of lies and exploitation, Gabriel said. And when foundations crumble, everything falls. Your business reputation, your social standing, your father's legacy, your future prospects, all of it resting on deception, all of it collapsing tonight. Please, Everton whispered, the word catching in his throat. We can negotiate. No. Gabriel's voice remained steady, implacable. We can't. You don't negotiate after you've publicly destroyed someone for entertainment. You face consequences. For 18 months, Helena Leon had learned to make herself smaller. Smaller voice, smaller dreams, smaller existence. She'd shrunk herself down to fit into the spaces Everton allowed, convinced herself that disappearing was the same as being loved, that silence was the price of safety. But standing in the grand Belvista ballroom wrapped in her brother's jacket, soaked in humiliation and punch, listening to Gabriel dismantle her husband's world with quiet words, something inside Helena began to uncurl. Not confidence, Not yet. But something older. Something that had been buried but never quite extinguished. Anger. "Gabriel," she said, her voice hoarse from crying but audible. Her brother turned immediately, his complete attention shifting to her as if nothing else in the room mattered. The cold calculation in his eyes softened not much, but enough that Helena remembered who he'd been before the tattoos and reputation, back when he was just her older brother teaching her to ride a bike in their mother's garden. "I need to say something," Helena continued, her hand still pressed protectively over her belly. "Then say it." Gabriel's voice was gentle with her in a way it hadn't been with anyone else. "I'm listening. Everyone here is listening." Helena looked around at the remaining guests, maybe 50 people now, the rest having fled like rats from a sinking ship. Those who remained watched her with expressions ranging from guilt to pity to cautious curiosity. They'd all witnessed her destruction. Let them witness her resurrection. "I thought I deserved it," Helena said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Every day of this marriage I told myself I must have done something wrong. Must have been insufficient somehow. I thought if I could just be quieter, more agreeable, more perfect, maybe Everton would love me the way he'd pretended to during our courtship." Her eyes found Everton, who stood frozen near the champagne fountain, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "I gave up everything for you," Helena continued, directing her words at her husband. "My career, my friends, my relationship with my brother, my independence. I handed you every piece of myself and let you decide what was valuable and what wasn't. I let you monitor my phone calls, control my schedule, dictate my entire existence. I let you make me invisible." Tears were streaming down her face again, but these felt different. Not shame, not defeat. Something cleaner, honest. "When I got pregnant, I thought it meant hope." Helena's voice cracked but held. "I thought our daughter would finally make you see me as human, as your partner, as someone worth loving. Instead, you used my pregnancy to trap me even more completely. You made me believe I was building a family while you were just securing an asset." Gabriel hadn't moved. He stood slightly behind Helena, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough to let her stand on her own. "And tonight," Helena continued, her voice rising, "you brought me here specifically to destroy me. You planned this. You choreographed it. You invited your mistress to humiliate me, while 200 people watched and laughed and recorded my pain for entertainment." Everton opened his mouth, but Helena raised her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of Gabriel's earlier command that several guests flinched. "No," she said firmly. "You don't get to speak. You don't get to explain or justify or make excuses. For 18 months, I stayed silent while you talked over me, talked for me, talked about me like I wasn't standing right there. Not anymore." The baby kicked strong, insistent, and Helena's hand pressed over the movement like a promise. "I'm 6 months pregnant with your daughter," Helena said, her voice steady now, clear and certain. "A little girl who's going to be born into this world in 3 months. And I will not let her grow up thinking this is what love looks like. I will not let her believe that silence equals safety, that making yourself small equals being cherished, that accepting cruelty is the price of companionship." Around the ballroom, several women were crying now. Not mockery, tears, genuine emotion, recognition, the painful acknowledgement of truths they'd maybe lived themselves or witnessed in others. "I thought marrying you meant escaping my brother's dangerous world," Helena said, looking at Everton with something that might have been pity. "I thought you represented normalcy, stability, peace. But Gabriel never trapped me. He never isolated me. He never reduced me to a transaction or humiliated me for sport. You did all of that. Not the criminal, the businessman. Not the dangerous brother, the respectable husband." She turned to look at Gabriel, who was watching her with an expression of profound sadness mixed with unmistakable pride. "I'm sorry," Helena said to her brother, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry I cut you out. I'm sorry I believed Everton's lies about you being the dangerous one. I'm sorry I disappeared for 2 years because I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake." "Helena," Gabriel started, but she shook her head. "Let me finish," she said gently. "I need to finish." Gabriel nodded, respecting her autonomy in a way Everton never had. "I thought independence meant doing everything alone," Helena continued, looking between Gabriel and the remaining witnesses. "I thought asking for help was weakness, that needing family was failure. But standing here tonight, soaked in punch and shame, watching my husband celebrate my destruction, I finally understand the difference between isolation and independence." Her hand found Gabriel's arm, gripping it like an anchor. Independence is choosing your path, Helena said. Isolation is having your path chosen for you and being told it's freedom. Everton didn't give me independence when he forbade me from working. He gave me isolation. He didn't protect me by cutting me off from friends. He imprisoned me. Every rule, every restriction, every moment of control that wasn't love. That was ownership. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if agreeing with her mother's words. I was wrong about so many things, Helena said, her voice softening. But I wasn't wrong about wanting safety. I wasn't wrong about deserving love. I was just looking for both in the wrong place, from the wrong man, in the wrong kind of silence. She turned back to Everton one final time. You told me I was pathetic, Helena said quietly. That I made it easy for you to trap me. That I was disposable once you got what you needed. You said all of that in front of 200 people because you genuinely believed I was powerless. That I would just accept it. That I had nowhere to go and no one who cared enough to defend me. Helena's expression shifted not to anger, but to something calmer. Resolved. You were wrong. The two words echoed Gabriel's earlier declaration, but carried different weight. Not threat, not promise of violence. Just simple, absolute truth. I'm not powerless, Helena said. I never was. I was just convinced by a skilled manipulator that my strength was weakness, that my voice didn't matter, that my existence was only valuable in relation to yours. But tonight, standing here in this ruined dress carrying your daughter, I finally understand something fundamental. She paused, making sure every remaining person in that ballroom was listening. My value was never determined by whether you loved me, Helena said. It was determined by whether I loved myself enough to walk away from someone who couldn't. And I do. I absolutely do. The ballroom fell into absolute silence. Helena looked at Gabriel, her older brother who'd crossed the city tonight and arrived exactly when she needed him, who'd wrapped her in protection without suffocating her autonomy, who'd defended her while still letting her speak. Take me home, she said simply. Please, I want to go home. Gabriel's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. Wherever you want to go, he said quietly. I'm here. Gabriel's hand remained steady on Helena's arm as he guided her toward the ballroom exit, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like armor against the stairs that followed them. But before they could take more than 3 steps, Everton's voice cut through the silence. You can't just leave. His words carried desperation now, the confident showman replaced by something smaller, more frantic. Helena, we need to discuss arrangements, the divorce, custody. You can't just walk away without... Gabriel stopped, turned. His expression was so calm it was terrifying. She can't? Gabriel repeated softly. She can't walk away from a man who publicly humiliated her while she's pregnant. She can't leave a marriage built on lies and manipulation. She can't choose to protect herself and her daughter from someone who orchestrated her destruction for entertainment. I have legal rights, Everton started. You have nothing. Gabriel's interruption was absolute. No rights to invoke, no moral ground to stand on, no authority to demand anything from her ever again. Your lawyers will receive paperwork by morning. You'll sign whatever Helena's attorneys present. You'll agree to every term. And you'll do it quietly. You can't force me to. I'm not forcing anything. Gabriel's smile was cold. I'm simply explaining reality. You have a choice, Everton. You can cooperate with the divorce proceedings and maintain some shred of dignity, or you can fight it and watch everything you've built collapse even faster than it's already falling. Thomas Leon pushed forward again, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. You're threatening my son. I'm stating facts. Gabriel's attention shifted to the older man. Your business reputation is already damaged beyond repair. By morning, every partner you've misled will know the truth about your deception. By tomorrow afternoon, your contracts will be under review. By the end of the week, you'll be facing lawsuits from every company that made deals based on false pretenses. You can't prove we claim to have Caldera protection, Thomas protested. I don't have to prove anything. Gabriel's voice remained conversational. I just have to tell the truth. That you married your son to my sister, without my knowledge or consent. That you traded on my family's reputation for 18 months without authorization. That every deal you made using implied Caldera association was fraudulent. The truth will destroy you more effectively than any lie could. Around them, the remaining guests were witnessing something rare, the complete dismantling of a family's power in real time. Phone screens glowed as messages were sent. Alliances were severed. Distances were established. The Leon name was becoming toxic. minute by minute, right before their eyes. "Mr. Caldera," a voice called from the crowd. A man in an expensive gray suit stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "James Whitmore. I represent several investment firms that have contracts with Leon Development. I assume you'll be making an official statement?" Gabriel studied the man for a moment. "My family's attorney will release a statement tomorrow clarifying that we had no involvement with Leon business dealings and no knowledge of their misleading implications. Any questions about specific contracts should be directed to the Leon's legal team." Whitmore nodded, his face betraying nothing, but his meaning was clear. He was already calculating how to extract his clients from Leon entanglements before the situation worsened. "Anyone else here with business connections to the Leon family should consider this your official notice," Gabriel continued, addressing the room. "The Caldera family has no association with Leon Development, no interest in protecting their operations, and no tolerance for being used without consent. Govern yourselves accordingly." It was a masterclass in destruction without violence. Gabriel hadn't threatened anyone, hadn't touched anyone, had simply told the truth and let consequences unfold naturally. Everton's face had gone gray. "This will ruin us." "You ruined yourselves." Gabriel's expression didn't change. "You built everything on deception and exploitation. I'm simply removing the false foundation you constructed using my sister. What collapses afterward? That's on you." "My father forced the marriage." Everton tried desperately. "It was his idea, his plan. I just went along with it." "You went along with trapping and isolating and controlling my sister for 18 months? Gabriel's voice dropped to something dangerously quiet. "You went along with humiliating her tonight? You were just following orders when you let your mistress pour punch over a pregnant woman?" Everton had no answer. "Here's what happens now," Gabriel said, his tone shifting to something final. "Helena files for divorce. You don't contest it. You agree to supervised visitation with your daughter once she's born, pending evaluation of your fitness as a parent. You provide appropriate financial support as determined by the courts, and you never, ever contact my sister directly again. All communication goes through lawyers." "That's not," Thomas started. "Negotiable?" Gabriel finished. "You're right. It's not. These are the terms. Accept them, or watch your family's reputation become so toxic that no legitimate business will work with you. Your choice." The ballroom had emptied to perhaps 20 people now, mostly those too entangled to leave immediately, plus a handful of curious onlookers who wanted to see how this ended. No police had arrived, no security had intervened, because everyone understood that this wasn't the kind of situation you called authorities for. This was something older, darker, more fundamental than law enforcement could address. This was power rebalancing itself. "You should leave," Gabriel said to the Leons, his voice carrying absolute dismissal. "Both of you. This venue, this city, this situation. Take some time to consider how badly you've miscalculated. And when you're ready to sign divorce papers and custody agreements, have your lawyers contact mine." He pulled a black business card from his pocket and placed it on the fountain's edge, not bothering to hand it directly to either man. "That's not a threat," Gabriel added calmly. "That's professional courtesy. I'm giving you a path forward that doesn't end with complete destruction. I suggest you take it." Everton stared at the card like it might burn him. Thomas looked between his son and Gabriel, calculating, trying to find some angle to work, some leverage to exploit. There was none. "Security," Gabriel called, his voice carrying to the venue's staff who'd been watching nervously from the perimeter. "Please escort these gentlemen out. They're no longer welcome at this event." 2 large men in dark suits approached not Gabriel's people, but venue security, responding to the clear authority in his voice. They flanked the Leons, not touching them, just making their presence and purpose clear. Everton opened his mouth one final time. "Helena, don't." Gabriel's single word stopped him cold. "You don't get to say her name anymore. You don't get to appeal to her, apologize to her, or acknowledge her existence. You had 18 months to treat her like a human being. You chose to treat her like property. You don't get a redemption arc now that consequences have arrived." Security began guiding the Leons toward the exit. Thomas went reluctantly, his face twisted with impotent rage. Everton kept looking back at Helena, his expression cycling through emotions too rapidly to name regret, anger, fear, desperation. Helena didn't look back. She stood wrapped in Gabriel's jacket, one hand on her belly, watching her husband disappear through the same doors she'd entered hours ago, full of nervous hope. The doors closed. Everton was gone. The marriage was over. And for the first time in 18 months, Helena could breathe. The Grand Belle Vista's marble entrance hall felt different on the way out than it had coming in. Quieter, emptier, like the building itself was exhaling after holding its breath through violence that never quite manifested but hung in the air like promise. Gabriel walked beside Helena, his hand light on her arm, guiding without controlling, supporting without suffocating. The distinction mattered. After 18 months of Everton's possessive grip, Gabriel's touch felt like a question rather than a command. Is this okay? Do you need this? Tell me if you don't. Helena leaned into it gratefully. Behind them, the remaining guests were still processing what they'd witnessed. Some would tell the story at dinner parties for years, embellished, dramatized, turned into entertainment. Others would conveniently forget they'd been there at all, especially once the social and business fallout from associating with the Leons became clear. Helena didn't care about any of them anymore. The night air hit her face as they stepped outside, cool, clean, carrying the scent of rain that hadn't quite fallen yet. The city stretched before them, lights glittering against darkness, alive and indifferent to the small human dramas playing out in ballrooms and bedrooms. A sleek black car waited at the curb, engine running quietly. The driver, a young man with tattoos visible on his neck and recognition in his eyes when he saw Gabriel, opened the rear door immediately. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked, his tone respectful. Gabriel looked at Helena. "Where do you want to go?" The question stopped her. For 18 months, no one had asked her where she wanted to go. Everton had decided destinations, schedules, every movement of her day. And now, soaked in punch and humiliation, 6 months pregnant and technically still married, her entire life collapsed around her, Gabriel was asking what she wanted. "I don't know," Helena admitted, her voice small. "The mansion isn't home. It never was. I have nowhere." "You have everywhere," Gabriel interrupted gently. "You can come to my place. Or I can get you a hotel, the nice kind, with room service and security and whatever you need. Or we can go to a hospital if you want the baby checked after tonight's stress. Or we can just drive while you figure it out. You're not trapped anymore, Helena. You have options." Options. The word felt foreign, like a language she'd once spoken but forgotten. "Your place," Helena decided finally. "If that's okay, I need to be somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't reach. Somewhere that's not connected to any of this." Gabriel nodded. "My place it is." He looked at the driver. "Home, Raphael." The car pulled smoothly into traffic. Helena sank into leather seats that smelled like expensive cologne, and the faint tang of gun oil, a scent that should have frightened her but somehow didn't. This was Gabriel's world, the one she'd spent 2 years trying to escape, convinced it represented danger. Everton's world, the respectable one, the legitimate one, had been so much more dangerous. "I'm sorry," Helena said into the quiet of the car. "For everything. For cutting you off. For believing Everton's lies about you. For disappearing." "Stop." Gabriel's voice was firm but kind. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were manipulated by someone who's very skilled at manipulation. You made choices based on information you had at the time. That's not a moral failing, Helena. That's being human. But I should have known." "How?" Gabriel turned to look at her directly. "Abusers are experts at hiding what they are. Everton showed you a version of himself designed to exploit your specific vulnerabilities. He studied what you wanted: safety, stability, normalcy, and he became exactly that until you were trapped. That's not your fault." Helena's hand pressed against her belly, feeling her daughter shift and settle. "What do I do now? I have no job, no money of my own, no friends left. I'm pregnant with his child. I'm completely dependent." "You're not dependent on anyone," Gabriel interrupted. "You're temporarily without resources, which is different. Resources can be rebuilt. Money can be earned. Independence can be reclaimed. You're not starting from nothing, Helena. You're starting from experience. You know what you don't want now. That's valuable." The car moved through city streets, passing restaurants where people laughed over wine, clubs where bass thudded through walls, normal lives happening at normal pace while Helena's entire existence had just been demolished and reconstructed in a single evening. "The baby," Helena said quietly. "She's going to ask about her father someday. What do I tell her?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment, considering. The truth, probably, age-appropriate versions as she grows. That her father wasn't capable of being the parent she deserved. That you protected her by leaving. That sometimes love means walking away from people who can't love you properly. "Will he want custody?" The question came out frightened, small. He'll want the appearance of custody, Gabriel corrected, to maintain his image. But actual parenting? Actual sacrifice and effort? That requires caring about someone more than yourself. Everton's never done that in his life. My lawyers will ensure any custody arrangement prioritizes your daughter's safety. Supervised visitation at most until he proves himself capable, which he won't. Helena absorbed this, trying to imagine co-parenting with a man who'd humiliated her for sport. What if he tries to use her? The way he used me? He won't get the chance. Gabriel's voice carried absolute certainty. You're not isolated anymore. You're not trapped. You have family again. Me, my resources, my protection when you want it, my distance when you don't. Everton can't manipulate what he can't access, and he'll never have access to you or your daughter without supervision. The baby kicked strong, insistent, and Helena found herself smiling despite everything. Her daughter was a fighter already. Good. She'd need that strength growing up in the complicated space between two worlds. Her father's legitimate empire crumbling from corruption, her uncle's shadowed kingdom built on loyalty and fear. I don't want her growing up around violence, Helena said carefully. Your world, Gabriel. I respect what you do, but I don't want my daughter witnessing. I know. Gabriel's hand covered hers briefly. I've always known that about you. Why do you think I never pushed when you cut me off? I understood what you were trying to escape. And I'll never expose your daughter to anything you're uncomfortable with. You set the boundaries. I'll respect them. That's what family does. Family. The word settled something in Helena's chest that had been rattling loose for 2 years. The car pulled up to a modern building in the financial district, glass and steel. Elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of place that suggested wealth without screaming it. You live here? Helena asked, surprised. Disappointing? Gabriel's mouth quirked. Not enough skull decorations and blood-stained walls? Despite everything, Helena laughed a small, broken sound, but genuine. I didn't know what to expect. I'm a businessman, Helena. A complicated one, but still. I have a penthouse apartment with a guest room that's yours for as long as you need it. Clean sheets, working shower, food in the fridge. Very boring, very safe, very yours. Raphael opened the door, and Gabriel helped Helena out of the car with careful hands, supporting her weight without making her feel fragile. They rode the elevator in comfortable silence. Helena caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, mascara-streaked face, hair still damp and tangled, silver gown ruined and clinging, Gabriel's black jacket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked destroyed. She looked free. Gabriel's apartment was exactly as he'd described, clean lines, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, professional without being cold, comfortable without being cluttered. Guest rooms down that hall, Gabriel said, pointing. Bathroom attached. Take whatever time you need. I'll be in the kitchen making tea if you want company, or you can sleep if you don't. No pressure. No expectations. Helena nodded, then surprised herself by wrapping her arms around her brother in a hug she'd needed for 2 years. Gabriel held her carefully, mindful of her pregnant belly, his embrace steady and sure. Thank you, Helena whispered against his shoulder. For coming, for hearing me, for everything. Always, Gabriel said simply. That's not conditional, Helena. That's permanent. She pulled back, wiping at her eyes, trying to hold herself together just a little longer. Go rest, Gabriel urged gently. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Tonight, just breathe. Helena walked down the hallway toward the guest room, each step feeling lighter than the last. Behind her, she heard Gabriel moving in the kitchen, the kettle being filled, cabinets opening, domestic sounds that felt impossibly normal after the nightmare of the evening. She caught her reflection one final time in a hallway mirror, still destroyed, still free, still here. Her hand pressed against her belly, feeling her daughter's steady heartbeat. We're going to be okay, Helena whispered to her unborn child. I promise. We're going to be better than okay. And standing there in her brother's quiet hallway, away from Everton's control and the mansion's marble prison, Helena believed it. Thanks for staying with this story, right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.